So hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so my name is Qingyun. I'm the founder of Silicon Valley Vector. I host a tech and investment program with Asian founders in Silicon Valley. And today we have very distinguished panelists with me. And the topic today is about global supply chain. And we are living through one of the biggest supply chain restructuring in the history of the United States. And we have seen the US has announced new manufacturing investment of over $1.7 trillion. And Texas is the #1 state for reshoring. And Austin is the #1 state. And we have seen Tesla has become the biggest employer in Austin. And also Samsung has announced a big investment only 45 miles from here. And today we have 3 panelists who are living inside that question. So start with Mark. Mark Duval, sorry about that, has run supply chains at multi-billion-dollar companies and now leads the Greater Austin Asia Chamber of Commerce. And Jessica Chen has 20 years of global supply chain experience with Fortune 500 companies, and now the US lead of a Chinese tech company, manufacturing company, Goertek. And Richard Luo Wei founded Miles, premium ice cream commercial equipment factories in China, Italy, and Texas. Let's find out what's actually true. So Mark, let's start with you. So you've run the supply chains at scale, and now you see what's going on the ground every day through the chamber. And we wonder, what's the biggest shifts you have seen the last few years? And also what you are seeing your members are doing and thinking every day.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on, right? So I think if we start with where you started, which is a massive shift in international trade, all the way back to China's entry into WTO. We've never seen anything of this scale since then. So essentially what I see is, so I'm the CEO of the Greater Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce, and we serve everybody from Samsung all the way down to local mom and pop businesses, restaurant owners, suppliers, service firms, but also importers, manufacturers. So we see this issue of supply chains from every perspective. Personally, I spent 25 years in China, so I spent a lot of time in Motorola, managing Motorola supply chains in semiconductors. I also ran our operations in China for the cell phone business for many years. And then I ran a company called Terex, which is a American large, I call it sexy heavy metal machinery company, competing with Zoomlion, for example, that you guys would know from China. But everything from cranes, tower cranes, crawler cranes, industrial cranes, heavy, sexy metal. So, it's been very interesting for me to see what's happened over the years. And the way I'd summarize it is the era of globalization, and certainly globalization led by China. So China globalization, that era is over. And now we've got more of a fractional situation. We've got more of a regional supply chain situation. So companies have moved from thinking about how to manage efficiencies and cost to manage relationships and geopolitics, and how to manage more of a resilience of supply chain than an efficiency of supply chain. So how to balance supply chain. So we move from sort of a situation of lowest cost to a situation of maybe lowest risk. So very significant shifts associated with that. Obviously, China continues to do an incredible job of raising its capabilities, incredible growth in technology, advanced manufacturing, incredible products around the world. But these shifts and the tariffs that the administration has forced into the system have certainly moved some supply chains out of China and into the rest of the world. So Vietnam, Malaysia, certainly we see that. Where else? India is benefiting. So we're seeing a movement, a shift of supply chains around the world, but China continues to rise as an incredible supply chain partner around the world, certainly with high-tech and increasingly high-tech supplies. So companies are really dealing with that shift from globalization to regionalization. And that's what's changed dramatically in the last couple of years.
And the second question to you and Jessica, you are a key leader in Chinese company and you have witnessed so many Chinese manufacturers in the tech industry in trying to expand globally. And I wonder if you could share some of the successes and some of the failures you have ever seen.
Yeah, thank you, Qingyun and Mark. Actually, I share a lot of similar insights and experience with Mark. And so I was in the consumer products industry in China doing global sourcing for several years, then moved to the US, joining Apple, doing procurement, and then joined a Chinese company doing manufacturing for many years. So my experience has been split between the US companies, Fortune 500, and the Chinese companies, split from the global sourcing on the procurement side to the manufacturing side. But both kind of experience, the foes are all related to supply chain globalization. As Mark just mentioned, the world is totally different nowadays, but what is the same is still the core value added to the supply chain is the most important thing for a company to succeed and also to continue to grow. As example to Qingyun's question, how are the Chinese companies are behaving to this currently very evolving and getting challenging, or like it could be good and bad. I think on the one side there is pressure to grow. I think actually not just China, the Asian supply chain, starting from the value add of the availability of labor, operators, the availability of resources, like a lot of lands, a lot of factories, a lot of policies from the government. Start from that, but through the years, because of the evolving of the industry and the growth of the different products, I think the companies in China and also the whole Asia Pacific has created their own value to strive and to continue to grow and to live without like impact from the outside. So no matter how the world is evolving, they still need something from the Asia Pacific. Another important thing is, I think from my experience in the manufacturing industry, we have a very interesting system of framework that uses like material, manpower, machine, and then the system, like we call it the environment, and also the manufacturing testing system. I think out of those, top three are the very important thing for Chinese and Asian companies. So the manpower, the material, and the machine. So for manpower, I believe it used to be operators, like cheap laborers. Nowadays, it's the engineers, technicians who knows how to build the equipment. Back to what Fernando was talking about this morning, those cannot be replaced by AI, or the value that you're creating and that you cannot be replaced by. So I think nowadays all the players in the industry, voluntarily or like kind of just with the flow, they start to grow their core values. And out of those, who can show the value in the manpower, in the machine that they're building, like the big machines that Mark is talking about, and also the material that they're bringing to the supply chain are the ones that can succeed. So I'll pass on to Qingyun, but I believe we can talk more in the interaction section. Thank you, Qingyun.
And Richard, tell us about your company, Miles, and how you decide to build in the US.
Okay, thank you, Chen. Thank you. So Miles is actually a typical company that initially was started in China as more like a OEM factory, and now become a local US brand manufacturer based in Texas, in Dallas. So 10 years ago, I founded my company, Miles, in China. We invented a very innovative commercial ice cream machine that combines the functionality of three separated equipment into this one integrated form. So now you just need this one machine to freshly make, store, and display the ice cream or gelato or sorbet right in front of the customers. We actually brought one of this machine here today outside. Probably after this, we can go out there try. We freshly made the matcha tea and the mango. And now this machine has been become the very popular equipment solution for the F&B business all across the world. Up to today, we probably have more than 6,000 clients all over the world. And we have many famous clients like Pete's Coffee, Haiti, Chachi. In the US, we have like Campus Group. We have Wolfgang Pack, Caterings, many of these. So what made us thinking to move our manufacturing to the US was, before 2020, just like I said, we were still as an OEM manufacturer in China, and we sell our products through our distributors to the US market. And soon we discovered that our distributor were reselling a big quantities of our product to the US at 4 times of the purchasing price they bought from us, okay? And not only that, but they, and then they created all the service, the network all around the US. But what was unfriendly to us was, they were trying to take advantage of our innovation, and they were threatening us to, offering better price. They were threatening us to, releasing our intellectual property to our competitors. So all these affect that we start realizing a few things. First is that, we just realize, how much value our innovation really worth in the US market, okay? But if we continue the OEM business, it's only going to be devalue and expose our intellectual property to risk. The second thing we realized that even we invented this product, but we absolutely have no control over the market, over the US market specifically. And we cannot actually provide continuous technical support to our end users in the US, which is very necessary. So these were the initial 2 reasons. And then the last one really pulled the trigger was during the pandemic. Obviously, China supply chain was at a mess. It really disrupted our delivery plan we were not able to fulfill all the deliveries to all the US clients. That's why, we just decided at that moment, we really need to come to the US, go closer to our client, and establish our own base here. This is about us. Yes.
So basically, as manufacturers, you basically have 3 options when it comes to supply chain. Or you stay in China, or you go to a third country like Mexico or Vietnam, or you come directly to the US. I think the 3 of you have witnessed a lot of different choices. Could you share some examples of successes and failures with those 3 choices?
So we've seen some of all of that. Obviously, going back to the risk, the global risk. It depends on the type of company that you are, what you're dealing with. So I can understand the journey that you described with Miles. Getting closer to your customer, having those relationships is critically important to not only protecting your IP, but also being close to and maximizing the value presentation, right, and the relationship there. So I'd love to talk to you more because that's an exciting journey that you've been on. But yeah, so we see, as I mentioned, we see maybe 3 different categories. So one category is the category of, let's call it Samsung, right? These are large global companies and how they're dealing with supply chain shifts around the world. Obviously, Samsung is investing $40-something billion in the region here to establish one of the world's largest fab complexes. So we've got companies like that that are looking at, frankly, the geopolitics and making decisions about where to invest their significant scale, moving supply chains around the world. Some are going to Vietnam, some are going to Mexico, for example, and some are staying in China, for example. So that's how do you, as a global company, how do you shift your footprint to deal with situation? I was in that situation with Terex. So we were looking at how do we want to rethink our entire global supply chain? We invested more in China in some areas. We invested more in Southeast Asia and other areas. We invested in Europe, in Eastern Europe and other areas. So, I mean, every company is looking at their global supply chain and constantly moving it. So I think the geopolitics maybe adds some dimension to that urgency or the de-risking. But essentially, those large companies are always looking at where do you want to move your supply chain to. Other companies are looking more at a sourcing base. So they're looking at, okay, where do I source my products from? And what we see there is certainly companies are finding a lot of success in sourcing from Mexico, from Vietnam, even from Canada. So we're seeing a lot of, I just saw a report this morning that I think it was the imports from China had dropped from 100 billion in Q1 to 60 billion. So that's like a $40 billion drop in Q1 imports from China. And so China's moved from first to fourth place behind Mexico, Canada, and Taiwan even. So certainly companies are moving their sourcing, and that has implications for your business. And then you've got the smaller companies, perhaps like yourself, but also smaller companies that are either looking to move to get closer to the customer, and in some cases, unfortunately, have gone out of business because they just can't deal with the supply chain shifts, the threats, or the uncertainties that a larger company can deal with. So depending on the company, they're dealing with different aspects of this. I would say that the more nimble companies, such as what you just described with Miles, you're able to move fast and take advantage of your value proposition and how do you get closer to your customers and develop that intimate relationship. Yeah, but from a chamber standpoint, we see all of that. We see everything from Samsung to local companies, unfortunately, going out of business because their supply chain the costs have increased so much because of tariffs and everything in between. So supply chain is so critical, managing supply chain, being in the right place at the right time. Fortunately, we've got new technologies that I'm sure we're going to talk about later that help us navigate that.
Thank you, Mark. I'll try to use a different side of perspective to share that. Because of my role of sitting in between China and the US with the experience on both sides, I have a lot of friends in the industry who are Chinese entrepreneurs, like Chinese factory owners, and Chinese industry players that has been exploring about this globalization or going aboard. We call it in Chinese 出海. I think a lot of them got forced into this strategy just because of to Mark's point, the globalization and you need to be resilient to react to every single thing that's changing on a daily basis. So through the years, I see a lot of supply chain are migrating to the Asia Pacific area, including Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Thailand, of course. And then versus going to the US is a longer shoot, right? So for Asian companies, there is culture shock, there is supply chain complexity that you can bring to the US. I guess that's a case-by-case discussion. But going back to what Han was sharing at the opening ceremony this morning, I think from a manufacturing standpoint, which I'm working in, we're still in the spade stage, so we're still doing the things for the customers. So we have to go where the customer needs to go, and I think that's a lot of the current players in the industry are doing. That one we just need to watch and see and be careful because the supply chain is very complicated. If you can't move the whole supply chain, then it just doesn't make sense, or the business will not fly. But through the time, you can explore through different stages to modularize it, and maybe when you move different parts together to Asia Pacific or some other areas, or even maybe from the US to China, you never know, right? Globalization is a global changing strategy. It always changes. But back to the theme of this summit, which is consumer, I think is what Han defines as the gold mines. I think that's a lot of the players nowadays are working on. I think for that one, for sure, we see a lot of players are like aggressively moving to the U.S. just because the market is there, and also I think the Chinese product has shown their value, and there starts to be to have brands that really deliver the value of Asian culture, but still starts to like get the U.S. audience to take them. So I think that is a learning journey, and is the beauty of iFly Venture to have this forum, to have the entrepreneurs come in and show their value while like have this culture be defined, not being lazy, but still like think about how is the culture that the brand is delivering to the market, and how the local audience is going to be able to take that. Because a lot of times, even though it was successful in one country, doesn't mean that it's going to succeed in another country, but the core of the brand and the value that's delivering is still the same. So I believe from not only just for the spade or for the gold mines, the same thing is that we have no choice but to face the changes and challenges the globe is bringing us, which is exciting as well. So I believe we can learn from each other, and we can study a lot of cases and just learn from successes and failures. But at the end of the day, I believe the real value will shine. Thank you.
I'm going to lean on to that last point that you just made, because I think it is really important. You know, I've seen it personally, and I see it personally today, and that is let's call it Asian brands around the world. You know, there was a time, let's say 50 years ago, where sort of made in China or made in Japan even was considered like really bad quality, right? That is no longer the case. Made in China, made in Taiwan, made in Korea, made in Japan, all of those brands come with real quality and value. So I think that the era of being concerned about quality coming from anywhere in Asia, that's gone. And what's happening now is, I see it increasingly here in Austin, as Austin becomes more Asian. I see such an appetite for Asian product, and not just from engineered products or from value chain or supply chain products, but consumer products. That Asian brand, that Asianness is incredibly valuable. So when you talk about, like, as you were saying, this iFly conference being about the consumer, I think certainly the Austin consumer, and I believe the American consumer, the Western consumer, there's a greater and greater appetite for Asian consumer products. Obviously things like K-beauty and K-pop and K-drama, those are a vanguard in that, but it's a halo that applies to all Asian brands. So it's exciting to see. I spent half my life almost in China, in Asia. So it's exciting now for me to see sort of the US catching up to that vibe and the appreciation for Asian products. Really cool.
I just want to share something probably relate to Mark's point. Actually, something we learned pretty quick after we set up the factory in the US. We learned very quick that actually the clients here, that they don't actually, well, let me put it the other way. The Made in USA label, it doesn't automatically add value to the product itself. So when we first set up the factory in the US, we were very into this idea of now we can make the Made in US label to our machine, and we would automatically assume that we can sell at a premium price, but that's actually not the case. A lot of customers, most of the customers, even the big brand, they really don't care where this product being made. The value still comes from the innovation, the quality, the brands, the service, the on-time delivery. These are what they are more looking into. And so this is some of the mistake we made in the beginning, as we were kind of insisting on every single machine we sell locally needs to be made in our US factory, needs to be made in USA. But this actually created trouble for us because at the time we had a very limited capacity. We were not able to produce every single machine in the US to fulfill the local orders. So what we react later and we find out what works the best is that, and even up to today, what we call the dynamic hybrid management is to still import, we still import 60% of the finished machine from our China factory. And Then we have the rest of the orders that needs to be customized, or the customer cannot wait. And then those orders we made in-house in Texas. So with this kind of the dynamic combination, we were kind of successfully managed the situation of the increasing demand in the U.S. That's just something I would like to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two last questions for all of you, and you could answer with like very simple sentences. The first one being that if you could give advices to the audience today, like investors and founders, what could be the advice you give to them who are dealing with supply chain issues? How about starting with you?
Okay. Well, I guess, if today, let's see, because from my own experience, if you're still thinking to move your manufacturing business to the US, I would suggest to think more of a long term, because what I'm saying is that you cannot rely on the traditional manufacturing solution anymore, because AI these days you can already see it start revolutionizing manufacturing, and soon it's going to integrate so deep in every segment of the industry that you can just not rely on traditional experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that, and I would add to that and say, when you think about automation and robotics, with the AI, the ability to relocate your supply chain anywhere in the world is going to actually accelerate. The flexibility, the ability to move your supply chain is only going to improve. So my advice would be, level up your flexibility, and be nimble, be fast, and move to where you need to move. Obviously, you have to deal with geopolitics, you have to deal with local politics, you have to deal with the implications of supply chain import-export, you have to deal with relationships, but you've got to be flexible. And fortunately, the technology, whether it's in the manufacturing process or in the planning, supply chain management, or just in your overall operations planning, with the tools that we have today technology-wise, it's so much easier to do that. I mean, I remember my days in supply chain management. Oh my God, I can't imagine dealing with the realities of today with the tools that we had yesterday. It's incredible.
I think in consideration of the audience today, I would say, because a lot of you guys are the creators for brands and for products, I would say you have an established supply chain already, maybe that you've been working with for a while and that you feel comfortable. My advice is keep checking and keep your options open. Don't just stick with it, because things are changing on a daily basis, and a lot of players are coming to the US market and also to different countries of the world. If you keep your eyes out, like from all the everyday miscellaneous works, you will find a lot of additional values that the supply chain can bring to you, instead of just like sticking with what you have, which is the easier solution but may not be the ideal solution. If we talk about the broader audience, including the manufacturers of the Chinese or Asian company, I would say that it just takes time as I said, the manpower that not just includes the engineers and technicians that you can find in the different countries, that also includes that you need to know about the workforce in the local markets. It's not an easy job to manage them. As for the machines, of course, another thing. Importing machine is not like a piece of cake nowadays. It takes a lot of paperwork and regulations and knowledge. So that one itself could impact a lot of the efficiency that you have in plant. And the material, of course, as I just mentioned, for the consumer products, same thing for manufacturing. If you have, like, out of the 100 parts that you need, if you move 99% of the parts to one country, you still can't get the line running because you're missing that one part. So that's the flexibility, to Mark's point, we're talking about, and that's why it takes a longer short. But end of the day, we're all living in this agile and growing world, and I believe all of you will be successful. Thank you.
Yeah, and the last question, and 5 years from now, do you think there will be more US manufacturing or less or the same? Like starting with you, Jessica.
That one is a very personal, opinion question. I would say definitely more to my, like from what I'm seeing, just because the economy of the US market and also to Mark's earlier point, the local users are more open to options and to other cultures, including the Latino culture that was mentioned this morning, the Asian culture, and all the different brands and all the different vibes. I think the US is becoming this melting pot of different cultures and different supply chain factors. So, and with the forum like iFly, I believe we can all add efforts to that to help the U.S. market to grow. So my personal thing is definitely going to be more.
Yeah, I don't see the U.S. recovering. You know, part of the issues, if I take a minute here, part of the issue with the U.S. concern about manufacturing and the reason why the administration is pushing tariffs and things like that is because of the concern about losing the capacity and capability for manufacturing, losing the middle class, you know, all of these kinds of societal issues as well as industrial issues. I think that with the advent of the incredible pace of technology development, of automation, of robotics, I think those issues will diminish significantly and the playing field will level. But I don't see the US ever recovering a role as being a dominant manufacturer around the world. I see China retaining that position, and I see that as a good thing. I see countries around the world, whether it's Malaysia, Vietnam, India, and others, also benefiting from the technology deployment and the ability to source and deploy capability. But I do see manufacturing in the US growing. So it's almost like everybody's going to grow. I see a positive, I actually see a positive future as the world's population drops and we replace the world's population in the factories with robots. I think we'll find a balance. So more manufacturing, but it's not necessarily dramatically more.
Mark said pretty much what I want to say, but yeah, I mean, also, just like I said, with the AI technology growth, the trend is inevitable that, you know, manufacturing will rely less on traditional labor, and this fact is, you know, is a strong foundation for the possibility to have more manufacturing in the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. And do we have any question from the audience? Okay, go ahead.
I have a question for Richard. Okay. So what are the factors limit the capacity for the U.S. factory? Because you mentioned even though right now you have a factory in U.S., 60% of orders are still fulfilled by China, not in the U.S. local factory. So I wonder what are the factors limit the capacity here?
Well, right now, so let me give you the numbers. So in China, we're able to produce almost 100 unique machines every day. Mm-hmm. So more or less in 1 month, we could able to produce like 2,000 machines. But in the US, we were only about, you know, more or less than 200 machines. Yeah, this is the case. Yeah, the capacity that we have here is only like probably 10% of what China capable of producing.
Okay, is it because of a lack of labor or? Like? Yeah,
it's well, for sure, labor is a big fact because. You know, in China, you probably heard, you know, the 996 system, and you know, obviously my China factory, the workers they just naturally they just work for 6 days a week, and they work from 8 to 9 o'clock. Obviously, we give them overtime. Overtime pay, but it's just a different you know management system, and they're driven by different management logic. Like in China, they are more like obey the company's arrangement. They don't ask why. But in here, like, you know, if you have something coming up and you want to ask your workforce to stay late or to, you know, to finish something before a certain deadline, it's not so easy. They definitely, okay, let me put it this way, like, you know, in China, if you maybe pay them enough, they will do whatever for you, okay? In here, even you offer something that is very attractive, they still choose to balance between the work and family. You know, this is a difference. The other thing is that, in China, like it's the workforce they are working at significantly faster, rapid. But in the U.S. it's like, I mean, it's not too bad to work like a little slow, but still, like, if you're talking about efficiency, it's still nowhere to compare what we have in China. So, yeah.
Okay, and we all know like building a product, we need to buy the material, right? So like the machine, when you build a machine, you need to buy the material for the machine. So have you ever encountered any like upstream or downstream material that you have to import from China in order to build a machine in US?
Yes, absolutely. So, so our product is essentially it's refrigeration product. There are, well, in Texas, we are lucky enough. That's why we choose Texas. There are 40% of the parts we were able to successfully sourcing from local companies. But then honestly, you still have more or less 60% of the components we have to source from China, from Europe. And it's just typical for my industry, for our product, that for example, like compressor or some certain kind of motor, some certain kind of sensor, Europe have the first tier brand that we just have to choose them for reliability. That's why it doesn't matter where we produce them. If we produce in China, US, or Italy, it's pretty much the same standard, except in the US, we are more compliant to the US like ETL or NSF more certifications, but overall the standards are the same in supply chain.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, I got a question from Mark. And first, I said thanks for the presentations, and also I get questions about like the main thought from the merchandise. So you mentioned about like the concerns about the safety. So most of the people like the transfer from the supply chain from the China to the United States because of the risk management, as you mentioned. But like those concerns made like majority from the big factories or a big tech or a big company or a small merchandise. If I just run like the merchandise stores or a convenience store on the street, should I concern about the risk of the supply chain instabilities or those risks? Or what do you think about from the general, like the small business owners, what they thought about these ideas, about the risk of?
That's a great question, great question. I think that risk factor is more geopolitical risk, and it's more administrator risk. It's like, what is Trump going to do next kind of risk. So it's less about just-in-time management and more about just-in-case management. Like, what if? What's the worst case? So that's the risk management that I'm referring to. It's more of the geopolitical or political risk than the practical risk. And I think the smaller your business, the less you face those risks, although the risk of tariff impacts probably becomes the reality that you're dealing with. But the large-scale corporate risk, I don't think smaller companies are dealing with that. So that's the risk that I'm really referring to is the large-scale corporate risk.
Yeah, so based on my understanding...
But I'm sorry, let me finish the rest of my thought. Sorry. The other thought is, and I don't mean to be negative here, but if you look at what's happening in the Middle East, the supply chain risks around Iran, right? And the risk of the disruption of oil is affecting everybody. That same risk exists with semiconductors in Taiwan. So I would say that if the supply of semiconductors is affected like the supply of oil with some kind of incident in and around Taiwan, that risk affects everybody. So I would say what I said earlier about risk is more about large-scale corporate risk. Semiconductors might be a little bit different. So if you're heavily reliant on semiconductors, I'd be a little bit more concerned about risk.
Okay, yeah, it's just like based on my research and understand, because like I'm still doing the procurement AI stuff. I can pitch you later on, so after these topics. But my research is based on the most of the merchandise who are important from the overseas to the US. Yes. So majority is still the small business. Yes. Yeah, so like I think like small business owners hold a totally different minds or mind thought, or their logics is different than the big corporations. So maybe like the most of people like concerns about, cause like they control the voice. They says like, yeah, China is unstable, so they have the geopolitics issues. But in the realities, for the small business, they're still keeping like the bring things from the China from other where it's cheap or where they get better qualities. But so would be like the reality and the major government or major thought or voice is just like totally get separated.
Yes, absolutely agree, totally agree. I think the risk is more for the large corporations that are looking at the geopolitical risk. The reality is that smaller companies are going to go to where the best quality, most efficient, best price is, right? And then in many times that is China, and it's going to remain China.
Well, if you represent like the Austin government, for example, will you support those people from small business owners to keep importing from China? Or your voice should be like, yeah, there should be potential risk.
Our voice is support the most efficient, best quality, best price, wherever that is.
I see. Got it. Right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much for the discussion, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.